Underwater fish. Absolutely all fish have one thing in common: they are silent. Always. Yes, and in fact, why do they need to talk? It seems that they live perfectly well without it. But why? What is the reason for this lonely silence? Once, about 4 years ago, I was on vacation at camp. Summer, sea, great mood and warm memories for years to come. Yes. There's no other way to put it. The shift started somewhere in the middle of May, in the tens. It was a pretty cold year then, and at the end of spring there were heavy rains, which found a resting place: our camp. Could this have ruined the mood? Of course not. We had a great hangout, a couple of cute girls who knew how to hold their punches, and some bully boys, of which I was one. We were constantly running away from excursions, smashing kids' sandcastles, going to each other's houses at night, which, of course, is forbidden, and just having as much fun as we could. There was a time. Among other things, we were most amused by bringing people to their senses. Sometimes we as a gang would beat a person up so badly that he would pack up and leave the next day. But who was able to stop us? The kids never complained, because they knew it would be worse. The counselors rarely saw these scenes with their own eyes, and there was no direct evidence of our guilt. Prove it, and then justify it. Anyway, they didn't even try to kick us out because, not caught is not a thief. It was the same way with nightly hangouts or escapes from tedious excursions. We always did everything carefully. Looking at the guys the first day we met, I immediately noticed a strange guy who kept adjusting his glasses, constantly slipping off his hunchbacked nose, giggling nervously, and talking in a horrible squeaky voice to himself. BR. I got goosebumps just looking at him. How had he ever gotten into camp? He would have stayed home, playing computer games, and not annoyed me with his presence. Oh, I remember him taking his suitcase, and that was it. He almost died. A hump the size of a mountain protruded on his back, his arms swelled with exertion, and his legs went limp. The guy tried to keep his face as best he could, but it gave away his weak physical shape, which everyone noticed, so he quickly put the suitcase on the floor and never touched it again. I was passing by and saw the picture perfectly. The guy politely and as quietly as possible asked for my help. Excuse me, could you help me lift my luggage to the second floor? At this point I could not stand it any longer and laughed, trying to say it out loud in passing. For the particularly weak there are counselors, as well as access to the street, where a bus will meet you at home. He didn't answer, only blushed slightly, and momentarily lowered his gaze to the floor. He stood like that until a tall man came up to him and helped the poor man. Fortunately, we lived in different rooms, but he was in the same unit with me, annoying me more and more every day. His name was Valera. On the penultimate day our whole gang decided to volunteer for canteen duty. We wanted to put a cockroach on the plate. One counselor, who raised her voice at us, i.e. the elite. This was unforgivable, but in the future it will not play a role. It is worth noting that we all did it qualitatively, because it turned out to be an interesting activity. After lunch began, I was called into the hall because someone didn't have enough to eat. I carried a plate full of thick soup across the canteen, and as I passed our squad, I noticed Valera. Something clicked in my head. I decided to stage an epic fall. I go like this, a la cool, and stumble. The contents of the plate flies right into the back of Valera. My carcass loudly falls to the floor, and everyone is watching, eyeballing. I get up and apologize to everyone wildly, looking especially at the counselors, who nodded understandingly and gestured for me to say that everything was okay. Valera, meanwhile, did not even move. Yes, the soup was not hot, but at least it is unpleasant. He was silent, which pissed me off. How so? I tried to add a spoonful of tar to his honey, and he just kept quiet. No, this was not supposed to happen. He just had to throw me a few words, so I have an excuse to drive him to tears. But nothing. At all. The night before we left, our company got together outside, where we were drinking alcohol. And I remembered that I never waited for Valerka to cry, so I decided to ask my friends for help. They offered to shave his eyebrows. Oh, how glad I was for this idea. From the street we easily got into the room where Valera lived, or rather climbed up the balconies right through the open window. The rest of us stayed downstairs. We did what we wanted, but he woke up. The next morning I learned that Valera was found on the surface of the lake, which was 2 km from the camp. No one ever understood why he did it and why he did it. But we knew. I knew. As we drove him outside in a heavy downpour, calling him names, putting stones in his sandals, bringing him physical pain, none of us wondered, why doesn't he tell anyone and nothing, why doesn't he talk at all? And yet he was always silent. It makes you angry. So that was suicide, the guy couldn't take it. Was it suicide? That's how killers are born, that's how a maniac's career begins. A little nastiness develops into a vicious joke, which becomes the meaning of life, which requires a constant feed the victim. And if she is silent, why do you need her?